Josh and Frankie. What a couple of dumb shits.
Hello, primates! You found Primus Tracks. Congratulations! This is not the only place to find Primus Tracks, although it's possibly the best. It depends on how you view social media, because we are at Primus Tracks on Instagram and Threads. There is a page appropriately titled Primus Tracks on Facebook. It is maintained by the man, the myth. He's up there on the 39th floor of Primus Tracks Towers. I see in the night sky, it's great, Frankie, because the spotlight that goes by every so often reflects off your spectacles, and it is Frankie Bearstein.
That's cool, thanks. Hi, Josh. Hi, guys.
That's how we know you're watching. It's not quite the Eye of Sauron, but Frankie is always watching.
Yeah, I'm always watching something.
Looking for any changes in the Primus landscape, any new auctions or listings. Frankie's on top of it.
Perpetually refreshing.
Today we are talking about track 8 from the Grand Pecking Order, the sole studio effort from the supergroup known as Oysterhead. It is Polka Dot Rose. Wow. This is an interesting track, Frankie, but before we get into that, we do have one, and just one, item of miscellaneous debris.
Oh,
That sounded like a groan of pain. Are you okay over there? You passing a stone?
I'm fine.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Just making sure. Today's miscellaneous debris comes from Joey Clark, a longtime listener to the podcast. Regarding Rubberneck Lions, he says, "This song is so obviously about peyote." I'm going to stop there and editorialize. It probably is obvious if you've ingested peyote. I have not. Joey continues, "Just imagine either Les or Trey bought peyote from a miser named Fred. Being famous, they probably had an intense come-up and thought everyone was looking at them, which is very common. Hence the Rubberneck Lions. Also, the cartoonish nature of peyote may have actually turned the faces into lions. The nausea is often so intense you can literally only hold down water and bread. Don't mess with a man when he's trying to be dead? Duff, trying to sleep it off or come down. 2 strips of bacon in my toasted head? Come on, bro. Deaf about a mescaline or peyote trip."
Wow. Very informative and sounds completely reasonable.
Sounds like something I don't want to experience. I'm glad Lesso and or Trey did it for us. And Joey, thank you for lending your experience to the proceedings here and possibly giving us the truth behind Rubberneck Lions.
See, because that's not our scene.
Yep.
Those are not the kind of conclusions we could have arrived to. So it's much appreciated when we get this kind of background.
We salute you, the drug users of America, who have helped us out here today. Thank you, Joey. Let's transition, Frankie, to Polka Dot Rose, track 8 from the Grand Pecking Order. Checks in at a brief 3 minutes, 10 seconds. Credits: music, Oysterhead, lyrics, Claypool. This one has an interesting history because it's more recent than most people realize.
Polka Dot Rose was not part of the batch of songs that were performed in New Orleans. So it was premiered at the Paramount show in Seattle in 2001. It was a regular during that particular tour. It was resurrected for the Bonnaroo Festival performance, and it came back for all of the preceding performances of Oysterhead, that being their 2 headlining spots and the 2 festival dates. Something quite interesting happened in terms of live history. Of course, Oysterhead has never been performed outside of the context of that group. But Polka Dot Rose has been teased rather frequently by Primus as of the latest tour. And I think I know the reason for that, Josh.
Does it have anything to do with where it appears in the set list? Because my understanding is it shows up as a lyrical tease during Groundhog's Day mostly.
That is correct.
Okay.
But I think this harks back to an interview Les did prior to the beginning of the tour, where the reporter asked him if people could expect some Polka Dot Rose during the tour. And Les was quite taken aback, and he said, I would never inflict that upon the guys from Primus. But I'm guessing that the seed was planted in his mind, and then he said, well, why not tease the song a little?
And it is really amusing when it shows up during the Groundhog's Day jam portion. I have a feeling, and somebody commented this at some point, I do have a feeling that Tim and Larry are completely unfamiliar with that tune or don't remember it. They've probably heard some of those tunes over time. But to hear him perform those vocals, underneath what they're doing there, it might be one of those things where Larry kind of cocked his head and said, oh, he's singing.
Yeah.
And has no idea what he's singing. So it's a wonderful little thing because Les does it with no fanfare. He just gives us a verse of Polka Dot Rose and then a few Keep On Paintings, and then we're back into Groundhog Day.
I got the quote, if you want to hear it.
I love a quote.
Interview before St. Pete show, Les Claypool talks Rush, his band's identity, and more. Mike McMahon. Interestingly enough, this is from April 27th, 2022. But they were already teasing Polka Dot the year prior. So wow, that is.
So Mike was listening then.
Yeah,
Good for
probably.
You, yeah,
interesting. So this is what he brought forward to Les. The non-Rush part of the setlist varies from night to night. What goes into choosing the Primus songs you're going to play? Or maybe you'll throw in an Oysterhead song, a little Polka Dot Rose. And Les said, I think that's something I snuck in as a tease. The guys didn't realize.
Yeah.
They won't go for me putting in no Oysterhead songs. It's not their band, so what the hell? They don't want to do that. They're going to be like, what? Are we going to play some laundry tunes then? But it's been like that for years. However we're feeling, it depends on the vibe of the day, what the weather's like, what the crowd is like. Is it an indoor gig, an outdoor gig, how hungover we are? It's sort of just an everyday thing that it dictates the vibe. So the mystery lingers. How did Polka Dot Rose find its way into the set list?
Just as a guess, I feel like the tempo of the Groundhog Jam and possibly something Les was playing at the time.
Totally, just the fact that he had performed with Oysterhead prior. Yeah.
And so those two ideas, I think, or those two events converged, and he felt like Polka Dot Rose would fit in there, and so gave us the lyrical tease, which is pretty fun.
Okay, yeah, you're totally right. Yeah. That makes perfect sense.
I actually have a bit of history on this one, Frankie. This goes back to the promotional run-up to the record's release. I believe this was posted as just a little blurb from Les Claypool, and I believe it was on the Oysterhead website, possibly in an interview. But Les said, Stuart Copeland plays double kick on a track on this record, but I won't tell you which one. Well, we've arrived at that track today, Frankie. Polka Dot Rose is that track where Stuart gives us a few double kick flourishes. Well, let's talk about this track with a little bit of double kick. So we have kind of some loose loops going on at the start of proceedings here, which gives way to an interesting bass line that walks around a little bit. And because there's about 20 seconds of introduction, you could argue that this song is really, once it starts in earnest, is under 3 minutes. Does not wear out its welcome. Trying to mine my memory, Frankie, I think this was one of the more pleasant tracks for me, one of the more memorable tracks for me upon release of the record.
Is it because of that slide at the beginning?
Very much like the slide at the beginning, that's kind of looping there. But the repetition at the end, for me, as a 20-year-old, being able, as you recall, being able to run down the hall screaming, "Are you still floating?"
Yes.
The other thing I would run down the hall doing is just saying in as many goofy voices as I could conjure was keep on painting, keep on painting, keep on painting, keep on. And so I was annoying my dorm hall mates with that as well. So I think that's why those two tracks, Oz and Polka Dot, yeah, those two are the two for me as we go through this album one more time. So let's listen to where that those loops give way to the tune itself, where we get an interesting bass line.
He always liked to paint with his sunglasses on, 'cause acrylics tend to burn on his eyes.
So that groove that Les lays down in Stew, it's understated. There's, once again, these guys are not showing off, as we have discussed at length based on what they've said in interviews. These guys are just having a good time. It's got a little swagger to it. Les is doing, he's, after the very Les Claypool first part, he leaves some space, but then he starts filling in with what sounds like a walking bass line, and it's compelling, to borrow a Frankie term. It is something that catches my attention, and I want to hear more. And I played a portion of the first verse because I really like the vocal deliveries on this track from all three guys. And of course, that really kicks into gear near the end. So we're going to hear contributions from all three members of Oysterhead when it comes to vocals. So this tune got my attention immediately. And as you suggested, this one comes from later as they reconvene to cut a record. Definitely sounds like a product of jamming, and it certainly maintains that air. But in the scant part of the tune we've played so far, Frankie, what's working for you?
The slide.
Back to the
bass,
slide, yeah.
The bass tone. The atmosphere that Trey is kind of setting with the guitar. Just the fact that it kind of kicks in. No, it's like so sudden. It's like a burst. There's no warning, no build up. Like it just comes on, and it completely absorbs you.
And at the same time, what Trey is doing is so understated and buried in the background almost subtle, too, by the mix. It is quite subtle. And he's giving us some stuff just tooling around in the background, which with a trio can be difficult to do. Some are better at it than others. And Trey does it very well here because he's often out in front. So we get that cool part. And then I'm going to forward to about the 1 minute mark. This is one of my favorite parts of the track because we get some double kick flourishes. But we also get one of my favorite elements of rock and roll, especially in drumming, the transition from the hi-hat to the ride cymbal, as you know, Frankie.
Yeah.
Opens things up, and we're getting into business here. Leading into our guitar solo. So you no doubt heard those double kicks. We got this iteration of the one phrase chorus, keep on painting, with all the different vocal layers. So they're setting us up for later, and later comes pretty quickly in this track, I might add. And I appreciate how they're setting us up for that. Fills me with glee. Smile, half a mile wide.
Totally.
Cool vocal delivery. The verses I'm going to talk about when we get to the lyrics because they have an interesting structure. After the guitar solo and some more vocals, I'd say the last minute to minute and 15 seconds of this track is where it just makes me want to yell and scream, keep on painting as I run down the street or the dorm hall. Actually, this would be an interesting exercise. I live in a semi-rural place, Frankie, but there are a handful of houses on my street, and I would like to just go out for a nice jog one day, but then start screaming, keep on painting all the way down, the half mile to the dead end where the creek crosses, and just see how many neighbors come out. But I'm forwarding to about 1 minute and 54 seconds because this is where we start getting a lot of different vocal layers. And Frankie, if anybody can do what Stuart Copeland does here, it's you. But let's hear Stu, and then let's hear your rendition. I've tried over the years. I can get down there, but I have to concentrate and find that spot. Keep on painting. But once again, it doesn't resonate like Stu does. And Stu's baritone is incredible, and you can hear more of it, of course, on many of his records. Most notably for me is the Gizmodrome record that he did with Adrian Belew, Mark King, and I'm blanking on the other guy's name. Love that record, but Stu's vocals are all over it. I think you and Stu need to have a keep on painting off there, Frankie. I don't know. Do you want to give us a few?
Keep on painting.
Oh, yes! And you've got room to spare. You could get down there and really let it rumble if you wanted to. You took it easy on us, and I appreciate that. But I just love, out of nowhere, there's Stuart. Keep on painting. So great. And then we get all three of them as they start layering the vocals here in the last minute of the track. So I'm going to let it ride for a few seconds, and then I'm going to show you my favorite part of the entire track. Love this. So it's so sing-songy. Keep on painting, keep on painting. Such an earworm. And that rides out for a little bit. And then listen to one of Trey's vocal layers here, because there's kind of a primal scream. And this is my absolute favorite part of the track at about 2 minutes, 31 seconds.
Ah, yeah.
I have always loved that scream. I think it lends something to the tune because the repetition of keep on painting and the character that is continuously without end painting at some point might have a mental break or just can't take it anymore. And hence the which is really fun. All the vocal layers are really, I just love all these vocal layers because you can tell they're having a good time. I said something akin to that earlier in the record. Even beyond that, here as we get closer to the end, especially Les's main vocal track, he's letting it rip and going and doing all the Les Claypool voices at this point. So let's round it out with that.
It's easy to see why they have so much fun playing this track, right? And why it's always a staple of their set lists.
If that is your studio version, that tells me with your live version, you can take it pretty far out, especially with the voices that Les is achieving there, you know, and then the whispery, keep on painting. It's, you know, it's getting close to weird.
What I find kind of interesting is that, I mean, there's nothing heavy on the record in the strict sense of what that term conveys. Mm-hmm. But, you know, things like Mr. Oysterhead, Rubberneck Lions, Armies on Ecstasy, you know, they are kind of relentless, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. And this one, it still packs a lot of energy. And it feels pretty compelling too, even if it sounds kind of lighter than those tracks. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, they're not kicking out the jams here. They're keeping the groove that they establish, and they don't kick it up a notch, other than the vocal layering. But it continues to have that strutting I think I said the word pleasant earlier, and it's so funny to describe an Oysterhead tune or any Claypool involved tune as pleasant. But this one almost fits that bill. It's pleasant. I like it a lot.
I am very curious about the subject matter. Perhaps you can shed some light on this, but my understanding is that there are polka dot plants. There is no such thing as a polka dot rose, right?
I did a little poking around, and there are a lot of, you're right, there are a lot of dotted, and I'm sure they've been bred that way, in a botany lab or some such. I looked for polka dot roses. There are all kinds of different roses out there. I don't know that you would call them polka dot, but there are some plants that have that name, and I don't know if they're flowering roses, but there are polka dot leaved rose plants that I've seen. So maybe if the polka dot rose doesn't exist, then Frankie, then it becomes a mythical thing, almost like the lost city of El Dorado, right? So that Mr. Merriweather is going off on a quest in which he will never find the thing he's looking for.
That's the thing. Without being an expert on plants and flowers, since the first time that I heard the song, that line struck me as someone that left something tangible in search of something that he might not even find ever, right?
Right. That couplet is pretty important to the tune, given that we don't know who Mr. Merriweather is, but he leaves his family in search of this thing that may or may not exist. We have an A, B, C, B rhyme structure, which is not uncommon. And of course, that's to the verses. And we have this exceedingly simple chorus, which worms its way into your head, or at least mine. There are two couplets to a couple of these verses that caught my attention because they are structured similarly. He always liked to paint with his sunglasses on because acrylics tend to burn on his eyes. And so I parsed that out. He always liked to paint 6 syllables with his sunglasses on, 6, because acrylics tend to burn, 7 on his eyes, 3. So we have 22 syllables total there. But he always, and then with something on, cause something, something, something on his something. I'm pointing out those words because the same structure comes back around with she always liked to dance with no shoes on because the gravel felt good on her toes. So there's a very similar structure there. Les is keeping himself within that. I guess he's showing us the experiences that these people are having, and he's couching it in that structure. Pretty close on the syllable numbers. With that first one, we got 6, 6, 7, and 3. This one, we get 6, 4, 6, 3. So he's largely keeping it not exactly the same, but he's keeping it close within the rhythm of the tune. There's a lot of great lyrics in here. You know, acrylics would be chemical-based paints, not water-based paints. So I suppose somebody might have a reaction to them if they're working closely with them. So the sunglasses could help. Just the imagery of the gal dancing barefoot in the gravel. I don't know who Eleanor is, Frankie, but she certainly helps this guy embrace the art world. And you know, it's funny. I don't want that to be a sexual reference. I want it to be that he's painting her legs or her thighs or something. But that's just what I want it to be. And Les leaves it open to interpretation.
This is where I've always been a bit confused. It might be obvious, but at least not for me. Are we talking about a subject that is painting in an artistic way, or are we talking about someone that is just doing a repetitive motion like painting a wall or painting a house?
I don't think this is Tom Sawyer whitewashing a fence. I think because of nothing brought him closer to the canvas. So canvas.
Canvas.
There, yeah.
Yes. But the thing, that's what makes the song pretty interesting. Originally, he wants to be a fireman, right?
As a child, yeah. And so I assume we're seeing him painting as an adult because of the warmth of Eleanor's thighs. I really hope that's not a child thinking that way. Anyhow, so we're seeing him as a child saying, I'd rather be a fireman.
And now he's stuck with painting. I mean, which is kind of unusual because you would think that it would be the other way around. I think it would make much more sense to think about people doing other kind of labor and having, this frustration about unrealized artistic aspirations. But in this case, it's the exact opposite.
I agree. And because, especially in the working class, the idea is to get a well-paying job so that you are secure and there's no guarantee in the arts. If we were to reflect that back onto the author of these lyrics, we know that he came from a blue-collar background and he took a risk by picking up the brush, as it were, to play bass and become a musical artist. There may be something buried in these that's lyrics that's autobiographical. But, Les has been more than revealing about that part of his life in many of his other lyrics. Groundhog's Day, for example, which we cited earlier. So maybe, just maybe, Frankie, there is a lyrical theme there that connects those two tunes, and that's why Polka Dot Rose is lumped in with Groundhog's Day in those Primus teases.
A couple more things. You would think of a successful painter as someone who is at the position where they can take the liberty to paint whenever and whatever they choose, right?
Mm-hmm. You would think so, yeah.
But the notion, that he has to keep on painting, and just keep going and going, what purpose is he exactly working for? I mean, is this someone that just has to comply with commissions? Is it someone that just has to make as many paintings as possible in the hope that one of them will be sold? I mean, what does it convey for you when they paint this image that he has to continue painting perpetually?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I just think that perhaps this guy got talked into it or just locked himself into painting, and that's what he has to do now. And so he just has to keep on painting. For whatever reason, we don't know what reason that is. To me, keep on painting in a vacuum sounds like a maxim for maintaining and developing creativity as opposed to continuously do this thing, because painting is, an artistic pursuit, especially in this context. But so instead of it being an artistic pursuit, it seems like this guy's trapped by it, which is quite an ironic twist on the idea, as you were getting to earlier. So there is something strange about this one.
That's the thing about Les. You can never exactly say with 100% certainty what some of his lyrics are about.
Yeah.
And that is just fantastic.
And not only did this guy get pigeonholed or otherwise, stuck painting, he smells bad.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you. The scent that could make a buzzard faint.
That sounds familiar. We've heard that something similar to that in the past.
Yeah.
That was one of 3 lyrics that jogged my memory, or I made an association. So I'll run down that list. Yeah. So we had the scent that could make a buzzard faint. Immediately reminded me of Camelback Cinema, as I'm sure many people were, because his scent would make a buzzard cry, comes from Camelback Cinema. So that same imagery. He never had much of a devious nature, but was hardly a modern-day saint. That same theme permeates the lyrics to Natural Joe from Antipop. He's a regular dude, but that doesn't mean he's holy. he's a sinner. Maybe not egregiously so. And then the other one, and this is just tangential, I'd rather be a fireman than paint. I immediately went to Captain Pierce from Jerry Was a Race Car Driver. So
interesting.
Is this childhood Les Claypool? No idea. Is this another look at him, as a kid? I'm going to be a fireman. But then he locked himself into painting, with the bass guitar and the pen. That
notion that you are hinting at, I think there's definitely a bit of that in the song. And I think we'll have the chance to elaborate upon it when we get to Pseudo-Suicide, because of one line in particular in that song.
Oh, there's a lot of lines in that song to unpack, and we'll get there in a few weeks. But yes, let's connect these two tracks lyrically when we get there. And that leads us, Frankie, to Primate's Takes. If you would like your thoughts read on this very podcast, go check out patreon.com/Primus Tracks. There are many ways to support us there. The universal constant is that when I post the thread for the tune that we're talking about, you can publish your thoughts there, and I will read them on this very podcast. We actually have just a couple today, Frankie. The Primatrons are busy, but we got a few thoughts on Polka Dot Rose. Edwin Allen Richards IV says, for some weird reason, Polka Dot Rose just makes me want to paint. I don't know if it's as weird as advertised there, Edwin, but it definitely gets in your head. Eric in Australia has an interesting thought on this one, Frankie, and perhaps you can help us unpack this because I don't remember this particular moment. But Eric says, in an imitating Kramer eating an ancient hot dog voice, interesting textures. Is there a Seinfeld episode where Kramer eats an ancient hot dog?
Yes, I believe it's when Kramer is very excited about an old cinema. He wants to keep that place running, even though I think they only project like very old films. And a hot dog has been at the candy store for ages. And even though they tell him not to, he consumes it and pretends that it actually tastes good. Just because he loves everything about that old movie theater. You might remember it as the episode where somebody poses down Elaine on the street, so she arrives to the cinema with her shirt all wet, and everyone is staring at her.
Oh, God. I don't remember that one, that episode at all, actually. But it does just remind me of the episode where Kramer takes on the role or the job of the movie phone, and he answers the phone with that jovial voice. You've reached movie phone.
Yes.
Maybe, though, for the interesting textures line, I need to pretend I have a mouthful of hot dog and say, oh, interesting textures. Carlos Arizmendi, El Patron Numero Uno, says, I've never seen Oysterhead, but I've gotten Polka Dot Rose teases twice. Both happened in 2022 at Primus shows. I got it in Madison during Groundhog's Day, and then I got it in Milwaukee during technical difficulties with something on stage. So not only are they working it into Groundhog's Day, Les is using it as a bridge because Harry wasn't there to play Maple Leaf Rag, of course, because it was a Primus show. So that was his technical difficulties tune. Carlos goes on to say, I have it set as my wake-up alarm on the weekends when I don't need to jolt out of bed, hoping to get a full rendition someday. Ooh. Now that's a question we need to posit to people. What is your Primus /Les /Larry /Herb wake-up song? Polka Dot Rose is an interesting choice. And finally, Brooks Delight, Frankie, says, I really enjoy the imagery of the lyrics on this one. It paints, no pun intended, a distinct picture in my mind's eye. However, I feel the song overstays its welcome by about 60 seconds. Well, geez, Brookie, cut a minute off that tune. There ain't much left. But I do appreciate the thought about the imagery in the mind's eye for certain.
It's The Gum.
The episode is called The Gum?
The Gum, Season 7, Episode 10. Kramer and Lloyd Brown try to reopen the Alex Theater.
Oh, Lloyd Braun. I remember that name. A minute since I watched any Seinfeld. Well, Frankie, for today's cuts, we are going back to familiar territory, Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Atlanta, Georgia. So Peach Fest 2021, Scranton. Let's jam this one out. Of course, the tempo is 1,000,000 miles an hour. hearing this nice and clear live recording, I can see why Les is putting Groundhogs and Polka Dot together, because that
Makes
lick
sense.
is reminiscent of the Groundhog's Day call down.
It makes total sense.
And let's close this one out. Let's hear the end of Polka Dot Rose in Lazy Scranton. Yeah.
Compelling.
Now, I know Oysterhead is just the three of them, but that the end of that tune is a great opportunity to, reach out to your local choral group when you're on tour and get them on stage to sing Keep On Paintin' for about 128 bars in the background, and then Les and Trey can just go wild with it. I know that costs money, so it'll never happen. Let's move to Atlanta, Frankie. May 1st, 2022. We've got some banter.
What are you doing, Trey? What are you doing over there? Hey, Trey, it's me. It's me. What's happening? I'm over here. How are you? How you been? Good to see you. Good to be seen. You know that Stu Daddy back there on the drums? I don't know if you noticed.
Years into our career, Les. 20 years.
20 years.
Plus 20. 4 gigs, 20 years.
How many fortnights is that?
How many? This guy knows.
Somebody was going to tell him. Well, if you're going to go with exactly 20 years, a fortnight is 2 weeks. 52 divided by 2 is 26. 26 times 20, Frankie, is 520. Hopefully I'm doing the math right in my head. That's how many fortnights it is. You are welcome, Les Claypool. Let's jam it out. Oh, interesting. I like that. Stop start. That's a fun one. Let's see, I half expect him to do the call down burner, and then they go into the end of Groundhog's Day. I can't separate them now. And Frankie says on your recording of Oysterhead performing Polka Dot Rose in Atlanta, Georgia on May 1st, 2022, you're going to get some cool guitar at the 8-minute, 15-second mark. So fire up your players or listen along at home. That's me. That's not anybody in the show. Yeah, all right. There's a lot of possibilities with this track live, and they were exploring them in the 2 tracks that you shared, Frankie.
How do you feel about that guitar part?
I like it because he plays the Keep On Paintin', on the guitar, and then he gives us some fun licks, and then they're right back into it. So that's a fun little jaunt for Trey to have the stage to himself there for a few seconds. Frankie, I can say this. Polka Dot Rose. Rinse your brushes. Cover your canvas. You've been tracked. El próximo vez, Frankie. Feliz cumpleaños, niños.
Looking forward to that track quite a lot. I'm eager to hear your thoughts.
Well, I will wear a party hat. I will not bring balloons because they are environmentally destructive and a waste, but I will wear a party hat. And maybe, Frankie, if you're lucky, I will bring a Coca-Cola cake.
Great. Not a cake guy. I'm looking at photos and it looks like just any other cake.
If you would like Frankie to sample Coca-Cola cake, please wrap it tightly, send a slice of cake to Primus Tracks Towers, 39th floor, care of Frankie Berstein, Mexico City. That's all you have to put on the package. They know where to take it. Well, that's it for Polka Dot Rose. It is a fun jaunt, and it does stick with me as one of the more memorable tracks on the album, Frankie. Primatrons, patrons, listeners, thank you all so much. We'll see you next time. Later days.
Willie Mays.
Keep on